Hello and welcome back to Voyage of a Time Wanderer. Today I am here to share my TBR for Victober 2022. So Victober is almost here. I am getting this TBR in just under the wire, filming it literally the day before Victober Eve, if you will. So as always, I am so excited about this upcoming month, celebrating Victorian literature and all things Victorian. I have some books that I'm really excited to get to, and I hope I find some new favorites this month. This year, Victober is being hosted by 5 co-hosts: Katie from Books and Things, Kate Howe, Petra, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Ross from Skelly Danding Around the Books. I will link all their channels below if you haven't discovered them yet and want to check them out. And as always, I'm so grateful to all the co-hosts for the work they do in putting together this celebration of Victorian literature and making the month of Victober so special for us readers here on Booktube. So I've tried to keep my TBR a little bit more reasonable. I know in past years sometimes I have made a giant TBR and then not gotten to all the books, so I'm really hoping that I have managed to be reasonable in my goals this year, and I've tried to just pick one book per prompt, and I've made a big sheet with all the days and what pages I need to read from which books on that day to finish everything up in the month of October, and it looks like it should be doable, so I am cautiously optimistic that for the first time in my life I have a reasonable sized TBR, and so without further ado, let me get into the books. So Kate's challenge is to read a book with either chronic illness representation or disability representation, and for this I'm planning to read Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. This will be my third Gaskell novel after reading Wives and Daughters and North and South, and I'm really excited to continue on my Gaskell reading journey with Mary Barton. I also read some of her short stories during last Victober, and I have found that her writing is very versatile. Like, every book that I pick up is very different. The characters are very different. The writing style can be quite different, so I feel like I don't really know what to expect with Mary Barton, except that I know I'm going to enjoy it because I do find her writing, no matter what style or kind of topic she's dealing with, to be just really engrossing and really gets deep into the heart of what it means to be her characters. So from what I know about this book, it is set in Manchester, so it's another kind of like North and South, set in a working town, and I believe there is some mill owners and mill factory worker characters. So that I think is going to be somewhat similar in setting to maybe Shirley by Charlotte Bronte or North and South. And I think there is a love triangle that we follow as our main character Mary Barton grows up. And from what I understand, there are a number of characters with disabilities in this novel, including a character that is blind and a character that has been injured in a mill accident, some sort of factory incident, and as a result of that injury, it ends up being permanently disabled. I feel like everyone that has read this book has nothing but good things to say about it, so I am hoping I really enjoy Mary Barton. Then Katie's prompt is to read a Victorian novel that is a Bildungsroman, which is a coming-of-age novel. And for this one, actually Mary Barton also fulfills this prompt because we're following Mary Barton through her adolescence and young adulthood into, I think, through her 20s and kind of married life. So Mary Barton is also a coming-of-age story, but the book that I'm going to use to fulfill this prompt is Aurora, Floyd by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. If you were on my channel this time last year, you know that I read Lady Audley's Secret for the first time last year and was absolutely obsessed, and ever since then I have been looking forward to reading Aurora Floyd this year, and I am so excited about this book. I haven't looked up very much information because I don't want to be spoiled, but I do know that it is another sensation novel. It has a mystery at its heart and is full of twists and turns and suspense, and also Mary Elizabeth Braddon's beautiful writing. I had seen some hints online that it was a coming-of-age novel, but just to be double sure, I read through the first chapter or so when I was making my TBR, and I'm already in love with the writing. Mary Elizabeth Braddon has such beautiful descriptive writing, especially around the seasons changing and autumn, and already in the first chapter there are these beautiful descriptions of what this Victorian manor house looked like in the fall, and it reminded me so much of the writing in Lady Audley's Secret. So I am really excited about Aurora Floyd. I think it's going to be the novel that I start off my Victober with, so that's going to be my kickoff at midnight, the stroke of midnight, on Victober the 1st, I'm going to start reading Aurora Floyd by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I was talking to Kate Howe about this book and because I was curious. I saw in some places, I think on Wikipedia, it's listed as a sequel or prequel to Lady Audley's Secret, but apparently that is incorrect. It is a standalone novel, just with similar themes and writing style, and Kate said that it is even more mysteriously plotted than Lady Audley's Secret in that the reader is really taken by surprise by some of the events in this book. So I think it's going to be the perfect suspenseful read for this time of year, and we are following Aurora Floyd, who is a young woman, so it is a coming-of-age novel. The first couple chapters are about her infancy and childhood, and then we follow her up into adulthood and all these mysterious events surrounding, I believe, her marriage. So that is the book that I have chosen for the Bildungsroman prompt, and I can't wait to get started with it. Then Ross's challenge was to read a work of Victorian poetry, whether long or short. And for this prompt, I have chosen a poetry collection, The Wild Night and Other Poems by G.K. Chesterton. I am really excited about this because G.K. Chesterton is a well-known Catholic theologian and author, and I have read some of his Father Brown short stories, which are kind of Sherlock Holmes-esque short stories featuring a mystery-solving priest. He's definitely someone that I think of as a 20th century author, not a Victorian author, so I was pleasantly surprised to find out that one of the first things that he actually ever published was this poetry collection, and it was published in 1900, so just in those final years of the Victorian era. I think when I read Victorian literature, a lot of what I read is kind of in the 1850s, 1860s, like the Dickens, Gaskell, Bronte kind of era of Victorian writing. So I think it'll be really interesting to have this later Victorian perspective, and I'm curious to see whether he includes themes about faith that he would later develop into his theological writings in these early poems. So it has about 60 poems in this poetry collection, so I'm planning to read about 2 poems a day to get through the whole collection during the month of October. And then Marissa's prompt is to read a Victorian short story, and for that I'm going back to the group read from last year, which is Elizabeth Gaskell's Gothic Tales. I got about halfway through. You'll see I read about half last year, which means I still have half to go to finish this collection off. So I'm going to pick this back up. I have 4 short stories left from last year, so I have still to read Lois the Witch, which is quite a long short story. It's actually 100 pages. And I believe it's historical fiction set during the Salem witch trials. And then I also have The Crooked Branch, Curious If True, and The Grey Woman. So I'm going to be trying to finish off these last 4 short stories so that I can finally clear this book off of my currently reading shelf on Goodreads, where it's been languishing since last Victober. And I'm looking forward to having some of Gaskell's spooky Gothic writing to read during the month. I really enjoyed the short stories that I read last year. Like I said, she's a very diverse author. So some of the stories in here were kind of like non-fiction-esque short stories. Some of them were historical fiction. So I'm curious to see what the remaining 4 stories are like, and if I find a new favorite out of this collection. I think from last year, the favorite that I had was The Poor Clare. I really enjoyed The Poor Clare, so I'll see if I find another one this year that I enjoy as much as that. And then Petra's prompt is to read a Victorian novel and then watch its screen adaptation, and for this prompt I'm going with Dr. Thorne by Anthony Trollope, which is the 3rd book in the Barchester Chronicles. The first 2 books in the Chronicles of Barchester series were very much linked. The Warden and Barchester Towers were very much like a novel and its sequel, and I believe the rest of this series now, even though it's set in the same town, we're really following a whole new cast of characters in the books that follow, and they're not as directly linked from one book to another, besides being loosely set in the same universe, so to speak. So this book is going to introduce a whole new set of people to learn about and live alongside in the novel. From what I've read, this book is really focused on money and how issues of wealth and class affected people and relationships in the Victorian era. And we're following a young couple who have fallen in love despite very different circumstances. We have the main male character, Frank, who is the son of a landowner who's fallen on harder times and needs Frank to make an advantageous marriage to bring some money in to bolster the family coffers and kind of save the estate from financial distress. And then Mary Thorne, who is a young woman who has kind of an unknown, illegitimate background and comes from apparent poverty. And we're following this couple as they try to make things work despite the fact that society and family is set against it. Frank's family is really pressuring him to find a wealthy woman to marry, and Mary has struggled with not really fitting in with society because of her background. But Mary's uncle, Dr. Thorne, knows some secrets about her birth and her past that will have a big impact on this relationship. So the book is following along as we discover what these secrets are and really root for these two characters to get together. I've really enjoyed my read through the Barchester Chronicles so far, and I'm looking forward to get to this third book. And then after I finish reading, of course, I will get to watch the adaptation to fulfill the prompt. So in 2016, there was a 3-part miniseries produced for Dr. Thorne, which I have never seen. The screenplay was actually written by Julian Fellowes, who is the creator of Downton Abbey, so I have high hopes that it's going to be a really well done adaptation. All my friends who have watched it have said it's a real treat, so I'm looking forward to having this miniseries to watch during Victober after I finish reading Dr. Thorne. So those are my books for the 5 prompts, and then I have a couple other things that I'm hoping to get to. I am hoping to read The Professor by Charlotte Bronte in my seemingly never-ending quest to read the full Bronte canon. I'm still trying to work through Villette and The Professor. Villette was a start and fail last year, and so I'm setting it aside to give it some time, and then we'll try it again in the future. So I'm going to The Professor this year to see if that agrees better with me, and I have an audiobook of it to listen to, which I didn't have for Villette, so I'm hoping that will kind of help spur me along. I kind of have mixed feelings about Charlotte Bronte. I didn't really enjoy Shirley, and I think that's made me scared to read some of her other books, but the Brontes are definitely one of the Victorian authors that I would like to have read everything by, so it's one of my goals to finally get through The Professor this year. I believe it was actually the first novel written by Charlotte Bronte, so it was actually written before Jane Eyre, but it wasn't picked up by publishers at that time, so Jane Eyre became the first book that she published. And in The Professor, we're following a character called William, who is a teacher at an academy in Brussels, Belgium, and we kind of follow him through his life as the professor and through his personal relationships. The cover image has a wedding pictured, so I don't know if that's like a big spoiler, but I'm assuming at some point he's going to get married. So we'll see if I end up enjoying The Professor more than I did with Shirley. I didn't hate the first couple chapters that I read of Villette last year. I just kind of ran out of steam. I picked it up towards the end of October when I was already kind of burnt out, I guess, after all my other reads. So I think the Belgian setting will be something kind of different and interesting, and hopefully having the audiobook will make this a read that I can actually finish this year. And then if by some miracle I've actually finished all of those books, kind of my runner-up is Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I'm about halfway through Little Dorrit. I finished the first half really quickly and enjoyed it quite a bit, and was thinking it was going to be a new top-tier Dickens for me, and then I got super bogged down in the second half. It really feels like a very different story, and I wasn't really expecting such a dramatic switch. So this is one that I would love to have finished up by the end of the year, because it's kind of hanging over my head to have this half-finished Dickens, and I feel like I can't pick up his other books because I haven't finished this one. So it's definitely one that I'd like to get to by the end of the year no matter what, and so if I have some extra time in Victober, I will be plunking my way through the second half of Little Dorrit. And I've heard so many good things about the miniseries, which features Claire Foy from The Crown and Matthew Macfadyen from Pride and Prejudice, and so I definitely want to watch that sooner rather than later, so hopefully I can finish up the book to make that happen. And then I thought it would be fun to include a Victober twist on some of my devotional reading this month. So I'm also hoping to pick up one of the encyclicals by Pope Leo XIII, who was one of the Victorian era popes. Obviously it's not technically Victorian literature because he was Italian, but it's in the spirit of Victober. And the one that I'm hoping to pick up is Rerum Novarum, which is in English called Rights and Duties of Capital and Labor. And this book is considered to be one of the foundational pieces of Catholic social teaching and was written in response to the Industrial Revolution. It's primarily focused on calling attention to the terrible living and working conditions that members of the lower classes were suffering through at this time, and advocating for the rights of the laborers to better working conditions, the right to unionize, and the responsibilities that government and private citizens had towards ameliorating these situations. So I think it will be really interesting to read, and at the same time I'm hoping to pick up a couple chapters of Henry Mayhew's London Labour and the London Poor. This is a book that I've had for a while, but I've never really wanted to read cover to cover. This is actually only a selection of his full study, but I think that it would be a book better tackled in pieces. So as I'm reading through Pope Leo XIII's text about labor and working conditions as a result of the Industrial Revolutions, which will have a kind of a more religious slant on the responsibilities of governments, citizens, and workers, I think it would also be interesting to just pick one or two of the essays that Henry Mayhew made about his observations about living conditions for the working poor. So this book is really cool because it has some of the original illustrations. Let me see if I can find one. This is this one is a hurdy-gurdy player. But basically, he went through and interviewed a lot of different working class people in different occupations, and then has chapters on these different occupations. So street sellers of manufactured goods, destroyers of vermin like rat catchers, street artists, thieves and swindlers. What else do we have? Let's see if I can find another picture. A circus clown at a Victorian fair. So I guess this is like street exhibitors, street finders or collectors. So here's a picture of a little boy who's working as a mudlark trying to find things that have fallen into the river. So I'd love to pick one or two of the professions that Henry Mayhew wrote about and just read through those essays during Victober and not get caught up on trying to read this cover to cover, but just have it as one that I pick up maybe every Victober for the next decade or something, and read a couple selections. And I think that will really complement Leo XIII's writings about the working classes in this time period. So that is my Victober TBR for 2022, and I'm looking so forward to kicking off with my reading tomorrow and just enjoying this cozy month filled with Victorian literature and other autumnal goodness. So if you're planning to participate in Victober this year, I'd love to know which book you're planning to start with or which book you're most excited about. And I'm hoping, as I have for the last Victobers and Jane Austen Julys, to put together some kind of little reading vlog for the end of the month. So until next time, enjoy wandering through the pages of a good book. Bye.